Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be looking at telepathy.
Oh, okay.
So that's communicating from one mind to another mind without using the five senses. And, this stuff is pretty far out there.
Yeah.
But we've got some really incredible sources that we're going to be
Right.
looking at today, and some of it's actually shocking.
Yeah. It's really interesting because when you look at
Yeah.
like the history of telepathy, even governments have looked into it.
Yeah.
Like
Goodness, seriously.
yeah, like I mean, they even had like a psychic arms race
Oh, wow.
back in the Cold War. Like the U.S. and the Soviets were
Right.
like trying to outdo each other with psychic spies.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
So before we get into all that,
Yeah.
let's just, define what telepathy is.
Okay.
Again, we're talking about, transmitting information like thoughts and
Right.
feelings and images
Mm-hmm.
from one mind to another without using the five senses.
Yeah, without using the five senses like sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of different types of telepathy. I mean, what
Yeah.
comes to mind for you when you think of telepathy?
Oh man. I mean, I immediately jumped to like mind reading,
Yeah.
like being able to know what someone's thinking without them telling you.
Yeah.
But actually like it's not always like that.
Yeah.
There's different categories. The main ones we're going to be looking at are emotional or instinctive telepathy and then mental telepathy.
Okay, so what's the difference between those two?
Okay, so instinctive telepathy, think of it as more of a feeling-based connection.
Okay.
Like you're sensing someone's emotions or maybe even their physical sensations.
Oh,
And this one tends to be stronger when people are physically close to each other.
so like a mother
Yeah, exactly.
knowing that her child is hurt or something.
Yeah, like a mother knowing her child is in distress, even if they're in different rooms.
Interesting.
Or, when you think about like how an audience reacts to a performer's energy on stage.
Oh, yeah.
That's like a kind of instinctive telepathy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's instinctive telepathy.
Right.
What about mental telepathy?
Okay, so mental telepathy, this is where it gets a little more complex.
Okay.
This is transmitting specific thoughts, words, or images to another person's mind.
Okay, so this is more like the
Yeah, this is
mind reading.
getting closer to mind reading, but it's still more nuanced than that.
Right.
It requires a heightened state of awareness. You need to quiet your emotions and
Oh, wow.
align with what some describe as like the force of love.
The force of love?
Yeah,
Okay.
for clear transmission and reception.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not as simple as just like, thinking really hard at someone.
Right.
There's a certain technique to it.
Okay, so where does this idea of like the force of love come from?
So the Rosicrucians.
Okay.
This is a group dedicated to mystical teachings.
Right.
They place a strong emphasis on this concept of the force of love.
Okay.
And they claim to have developed some really effective techniques
Okay.
for mental telepathy that harness this force.
Okay. I'm intrigued. So do they have like
Yeah,
a step-by-step
they do. They actually have.
guided telepathy?
Yeah, they have a whole system for both the sender and the receiver.
Oh, wow.
So let's start with the sender.
Okay.
First, they visualize the person they want to communicate with,
Okay.
and they hold them in their mind with the feeling of love.
Okay.
Then they quiet their mind and focus on what they call the mental level.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, you got to focus, right?
Yeah, you got to quiet all the noise,
Mhm.
all the mental chatter,
Yeah.
and then they create a clear picture of the message they want to send.
Check.
So this could be a word, a phrase, or even a detailed image.
Okay, so they're visualizing.
They're visualizing it,
Yeah.
and then they project this message towards the receiver,
Okay.
again imbued with this feeling of love.
So the love is really important.
Yeah, the love is key.
Okay.
And then finally, they release the thought.
Oh, so it's not just about holding on to it.
No, it's about sending it out,
It's about sending it and then letting it go.
letting it go.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that's the center.
that's the sender.
What about the receiver? What are they doing during all this?
Yeah, so the receiver also has a crucial role.
Okay.
They also start by cultivating that feeling of love towards the sender,
Okay.
and then they elevate their consciousness to that mental level as well.
Mhm.
And they just relax with a detached and open mindset.
Okay.
It's not about actively trying to grab the thought.
Oh.
It's more about creating a space for it to arrive.
Okay, so it's kind of like
Yeah.
you're tuning into a frequency.
Exactly. It's like tuning into a radio. You're
Yeah.
dialing in the right frequency to receive the message.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Rosicrucians, they believe that consistent practice with these techniques can lead to some pretty amazing results.
Really?
Yeah, they even suggest that widespread telepathic communication might be a part of humanity's future.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
But is there any science behind this? This
Yeah.
force of love thing sounds
Yeah,
real.
it sounds a little mystical, right?
Yeah,
But you might be surprised.
okay,
There's actually some really fascinating research emerging that suggests
okay.
our brains might be capable of communicating through magnetic fields.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
So, our brain generates a weak magnetic field
Mm-hmm.
through the electrical activity of our neurons.
Right.
And recent studies have discovered a protein called cryptochrome.
Cryptochrome.
Yeah, it's found in the retina and the brain,
Okay.
and it's sensitive to magnetic fields.
Oh, wow. So could that be like a
Yeah, some people think
telepathic antenna?
that it might act as like a telepathic antenna,
Yeah.
picking up these signals from other brains.
Wow.
And it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
Scientists have also found magnetite particles in the
Right.
brain.
What are those?
These are essentially tiny magnets.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they could potentially act as receptors
Okay.
for these magnetic fields generated by other brains.
Wow. So our brains could be
Yeah, it's like we're
sending and receiving
magnetic signals.
both send and receive.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So how does this all connect back to the
Right.
Rosicrucian techniques?
Well, if we think about this idea of a magnetic field mechanism,
Right.
this emphasis on love and mental focus from the Rosicrucians could be a way to enhance and direct
Oh.
the brain's magnetic signals.
Okay, so maybe it's not so...
Yeah, maybe it's not just mystical hocus pocus.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some actual science behind it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, and then what about mirror neurons?
Oh, yeah. Mirror neurons, these are
I
fascinating.
love mirror neurons.
They fire both when we act and when we observe others acting.
Yeah.
So they're thought to be involved in understanding intentions and emotions.
Right.
And they might actually be playing a role in how we subconsciously receive
Oh, wow.
and interpret these telepathic signals.
So they're picking up on those
Yeah, especially on an emotional level.
subconscious cues?
Yeah, like maybe those subtle cues from another person's brain
Yeah.
through these magnetic fields.
Wow, this is...
It's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's very complex, but also really fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've only just scratched the surface here.
Yeah, I'm ready to keep going.
Yeah, let's dive deeper.
Let's do it.
All right, so remember we mentioned earlier about the government's interest in telepathy?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So there's this really intriguing story involving the CIA
Okay.
and some declassified research.
Yeah, you mentioned this psychic arms race?
Yeah, the psychic arms race.
And it started after World War II with a
Exactly. So after World War II,
captured Nazi research.
they captured all this Nazi research, and the Nazis, they were really into the occult.
Did really?
And paranormal phenomena. So there's evidence that suggests they were actually doing experiments
Oh, wow.
on telepathy and other psychic abilities.
Oh, that's kind of scary.
Yeah, it's a little creepy.
But really interesting.
Yeah, super fascinating.
Do we know anything about, like, the methods?
So unfortunately, a lot of that information is still classified.
Okay.
But it's believed they drew on ancient mystical traditions
Okay.
and esoteric practices, maybe combined with some early scientific experimentation.
So they could have been exploring stuff similar to what the
It's definitely possible.
Rosicrucians are doing?
Yeah, there could be some overlap there.
Wow.
And what's interesting is that after the war, both the U.S. and the Soviet Union,
Right.
they were really eager to get their hands on this Nazi research.
Oh, yeah, because if you could use telepathy for, like,
Exactly.
espionage...
Warfare, that would be huge.
Imagine communicating silently with spies behind enemy lines.
Yeah.
Or even potentially influencing the thoughts and actions of your enemies.
That's like straight out of it's like a spy thriller.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it also raises some serious ethical questions.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, what if telepathy is used for manipulation or
you
harm?
could really
You could do some serious damage.
gas people up.
Yeah, so it highlights the importance of approaching this
Right.
with a strong sense of responsibility and ethical awareness.
Absolutely. We need to be mindful of the consequences,
Yeah,
both individually and as a society.
for sure.
If we're going to explore this,
Yeah,
we need to be careful.
we need to be wise about it.
Yeah.
And maybe the Rosicrucian emphasis on love and compassion
Right.
can offer some guidance on
Yeah.
how to use these abilities for good.
Yeah, yeah. So we need to go into this with both our minds and our hearts open.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay,
So this deep dive has already taken us through some pretty incredible territory.
yeah, it has.
From ancient mystical teachings to cutting-edge scientific discoveries.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, and I'm feeling this, like, real sense of wonder and possibility.
Yeah, me too.
Because it's like maybe this ability to communicate directly with other minds
Yeah.
isn't so far-fetched after all.
It might be closer than we think.
Yeah. Okay, so,
Sure.
all right. So
Sure.
we're going to take a quick break.
Okay,
And when we come back, we're going to
I'm
dive even deeper
sounds good.
into this world
Okay,
of telepathy.
I'm ready.
All right, we'll be right back.
All right.
All right, so we're back, and we're talking about telepathy.
Yes.
So I'm curious, we've talked about like these different techniques and
Right.
talked about the science.
Mhm.
Does any of this stuff actually work? Like, are there
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, does it really work?
are there real life examples?
Right. Well, that's where things get a little tricky.
Okay.
Controlled scientific studies are still pretty limited,
Yeah.
and a lot of the evidence we have is anecdotal.
Right.
But there are some really intriguing cases
Okay.
and experiments that suggest telepathy might be more than just a theoretical possibility.
Okay, I'm ready for some examples.
Okay, so one of the most famous cases involves this woman named Doris Lessing.
Okay.
She was a Nobel Prize-winning author,
Oh, wow.
and she wrote extensively about her experiences with telepathy.
Really?
Yeah, she claimed to have this really strong telepathic connection with her son,
Huh.
and she would often know what he was thinking or feeling even when they were miles apart.
Wow. So like a mother's intuition kind of thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, skeptics would definitely say it's just a mother's intuition,
Right.
but her experiences were so consistent and so vivid
Yeah.
that she was convinced it was something more.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a Nobel Prize winner,
Yeah, exactly.
you're probably a pretty smart person.
Yeah, you'd think so.
Yeah, so are there any experiments that have tried to study this in a more controlled setting?
Yeah, there have actually been quite a few,
Okay.
dating back to the early 20th century.
Wow.
One classic experiment involved using Zener cards.
Okay.
So these cards have 5 different symbols on them,
Okay.
and the sender would focus on a specific card,
Okay.
and the receiver would try to guess which symbol they were sending.
So it's kind of like a telepathic guessing game?
Exactly, like a telepathic guessing game.
Okay.
And some studies showed results that were slightly above chance,
Okay.
which could suggest a subtle telepathic effect.
Right.
But the findings were often inconsistent
Right.
and difficult to replicate.
Yeah, that's the problem with a lot of this stuff.
Exactly. It's hard to pin down.
Yeah.
But, the research is continuing.
Right.
And with advances in neuroscience and brain imaging techniques,
Mm-hmm.
we might be getting closer to understanding how this all works.
Okay, so let's say someone's listening to this.
Yeah.
And they're like, I want to explore this telepathy thing.
Right.
What advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, I'd say approach it with an open mind,
Okay.
but also a healthy dose of skepticism.
Yeah.
Don't believe everything you read or hear.
Right.
Be critical of the information you come across.
Yeah. Good advice in general.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're interested in those Rosicrucian techniques,
Yeah.
there's a ton of resources available online and in libraries.
Okay.
Just, make sure you're choosing reputable sources.
Right. Yeah.
And if you're more interested in the scientific side of things,
Yeah.
there are some great books and articles out there written by neuroscientists and researchers who are studying this stuff.
Okay.
But just keep in mind, it's a relatively new field.
Right.
So the findings are constantly evolving.
Yeah. So just be open.
Yeah.
Keep learning.
Exactly. Stay curious, keep learning, and maybe even try some of the techniques yourself.
Yeah.
You never know what you might discover.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been an awesome deep dive into the
Yeah.
world of telepathy.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we really have.
From ancient wisdom to cutting-edge science.
And who knows, maybe telepathy is more real than we think.
Yeah, maybe it's just a matter of time before we unlock its secrets.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning,
Yeah,
and keep an open mind.
absolutely.
So we've talked about those Rosicrucian techniques
Yeah.
and the potential science behind telepathy,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm really curious, like, does any of this stuff actually work?
Right. Are there real-life examples?
Yeah, like, is there evidence that this is more than just a theory?
Yeah, well, that's where things get a little tricky. Controlled scientific studies are still pretty limited.
Yeah.
A lot of the evidence is anecdotal.
Right.
But there are some intriguing cases
Okay.
and experiments that suggest it might be more than just a possibility.
Okay, give me some examples.
All right, so one of the most famous cases involves this woman named Doris Lessing.
Okay.
She was a Nobel Prize-winning author.
Wow, a Nobel Prize winner.
Yeah, and she wrote extensively about her experiences with telepathy.
Really?
Yeah, she claimed to have this strong telepathic connection with her son.
Okay.
And she would often know what he was thinking or feeling, even when they were miles apart.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So like a mother's intuition kind of thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, skeptics would definitely say it's just a mother's intuition.
Right.
But her experiences were so consistent and vivid
Right.
that she was convinced it was something more.
Yeah, I mean, a Nobel Prize winner.
Exactly.
They're probably pretty sharp.
Yeah, you would think so.
So are there any experiments that have tried to study this in like a more controlled setting?
Yeah, there have actually been quite a few dating back to the early 20th century.
Okay.
One classic experiment used these things called Zener cards.
Zener cards.
Yeah, they have 5 different symbols on them.
Okay.
And the sender would focus on a specific card, and the receiver would try to guess which symbol they were sending.
So like a telepathic guessing game.
Exactly, a telepathic guessing game.
Okay.
And some studies showed results that were slightly above chance,
Okay.
which could suggest a subtle telepathic effect.
Right.
But the findings were often inconsistent and hard to replicate.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the problem with a lot of this stuff.
Exact. It's hard to pin down scientifically.
Yeah. But the research is continuing with all these advances in neuroscience and brain imaging.
Yeah. And hopefully we'll get some more definitive answers.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say someone's listening to this.
Right.
And they're like, I want to try this telepathy thing.
Yeah.
What advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, I would say approach it with an open mind, but also a healthy dose of skepticism.
Yeah.
Don't believe everything you read or hear.
Right.
Be critical of the information you come across.
Good advice for anything, really.
Yeah, for sure, for life in general. And if you're interested in those Rosicrucian techniques, there's tons of resources available online and in libraries.
Okay.
Just make sure you're choosing reputable sources.
Yeah. Right.
And if you're more interested in the scientific side, there are some great books and articles written by neuroscientists and researchers
Okay.
who are studying this.
Awesome.
But just keep in mind, it's a relatively new field.
Right.
So the findings are always evolving.
So stay curious, keep learning, and maybe even try some of the techniques yourself.
Exactly. You never know what you might discover.
That's a great point.
Yeah,
All right, well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of telepathy.
it has been.
We've explored ancient wisdom, cutting-edge science,
Yeah.
even delved into some real-life examples.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe telepathy is more real than we think.
Maybe one day we'll all be communicating telepathically.
Yeah, it could be the future of communication.
All right, thanks for joining us, everyone, on this incredible journey.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next episode on While We Were Distracted.